Hello, welcome to our 84th step in our walking tour through the Bible, and we're in the first book of Samuel. I'm Father Alexander, by the way, and this is St. Peter's and Hove. And what we've got is chapters 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And this covers basically the transition from the rule by Samuel, a charismatic figure, a judge, to the rule by a king. It's a very confusing set of chapters because there are a lot of redundancies, i.e., a lot of things are said twice, a lot of stories are told twice. And there are also quite a lot of incoherences. So, what you see in these chapters is several traditions coming together, which have been diced and spliced and woven together. Remember, the editors of this book of Samuel didn't want to throw anything away, just like in the previous parts of the Bible, so everything gets put in. Well, first of all, we're told some good things about Saul, and that is he's tall, which is great. And the other thing is he can win battles. So, in other words, when the Ammonites invade, Saul is the man who deals with the Ammonite invasion. He calls out all the tribes of Israel and unites them. He defeats the Ammonites, and then he is acclaimed as king by the people of Israel. He's also been anointed by Samuel beforehand, and then he sort of, if you like, he has a coronation. So Saul, with the consent of the people of Israel, as a proven, tried, and tested general, is given the kingship by the people. He is the one who will lead them into battle from now on. And yet, there are also quite a lot of other things in these chapters which are rather negative about Saul. First of all, how Saul and Samuel meet. Saul is out looking for the she-donkeys of his father when by chance he comes upon Samuel, and Samuel sends him to sleep on the roof and then anoints him the next morning. Very bizarre story. One assumes that this story is an anti-Saul story, told about Saul maybe long time after he was dead to make Saul look ridiculous and to make Saul's kingship look like a mistake. And indeed, later on, we'll see Saul's kingship is generally regarded as a terrible mistake by everybody because King Saul is a failure. And so, in this story with the she-donkeys, King Saul is made to look ridiculous. In other words, this is something that shouldn't have happened. Then we got another story about how King Saul is chosen by lot. So we've got two choosings of Saul. They're alternative versions, if you like, alternative facts. And Saul is chosen by lot. It's whittled down, tribe of Benjamin, then the various clans in Belgium, and then the various families. And he's found hiding amongst the baggage. This is chapter 10, I think. Yes, somewhere. No, where is it? Blah, blah, blah. The consecration. Anyway, I think it's somewhere in chapter 10. He's found hiding amongst the baggage. He's designated by king by law. Because it's the end of chapter 10. It's chapter 10, verse 22. They consulted the Lord. Has the man come here? The Lord replied, there he is, hiding among the baggage. So this, again, is a sort of a bizarre story. What the earth is he doing hiding among the baggage? So it's like Saul is some sort of idiot or fall guy. And I think that's, so it's that again is an anti-Saul story. Whereas in chapter 11, Saul goes and beats the Ammonite. That's clearly a pro-Saul story. Saul was the king. They must have chosen him for some reason. The fact he could win battles seems to be a reason. Then chapter 12, we have this very dyspeptic talk by Samuel, with which he upbraids the people for asking for a king and saying, in asking for a king, you have sinned. And God is going to punish you. But don't worry about it. As long as you stay with God, he won't punish you. And so it's a little bit incoherent, that. One can imagine that this chapter 12, this diatribe by Samuel, which starts off by Samuel more or less reproaching the people, saying, I have faithfully done all that you asked of me, and have appointed you a king. In other words, I've done everything you wanted, you're still not grateful. And I've even given you a king, which was a sign of your ingratitude to me. So, and then, of course, the Lord is your witness, and they say, he's saying, I didn't mistreat you, I didn't rule you badly, and yet you still wanted a king. In other words, he's pointing to that fundamental flaw in human nature. You had everything you needed, you had everything you wanted, but you wanted the one thing you shouldn't have had. It's very much a fall story, that. In other words, they were living in perfect happiness. Every time some problem arose, God sent them a judge. And every time, and of course, the problems arose because of their infidelity. But now, oh no, that's not good enough for you. You want what you shouldn't want. You want a king. So, in other words, just as Adam and Eve had everything they wanted in the garden, and they were told, no, not that. You mustn't have that tree. Yet, of course, as soon as God's back was turned, it was to that tree that Eve gravitated. She didn't have much trouble persuading her husband, showed that he was perfectly willing as well to get hold of that tree. He stretched out his hand. And similarly, the people, they want a king. So they have been unfaithful to God, is the implication in wanting a king. Now, you can imagine how this passage would have appealed to Oliver Cromwell and his chums. You remember in the Civil War, in the English Civil War, one of the war cries of the Parliamentary Army, the new model army, was, "We have no king but Jesus." And of course, Charles Stuart, the king, was eventually put to death, and he was held to be Charles Stuart, that man of blood. And of course, that man of blood is a phrase that's actually told of King David, Saul's successor, by one of Saul's friends, relations. So you can see here that this has enormous political implications for our history, and even today. People want what they can't have, and they want a political system that they think is going to deliver something wonderful for them. But generally, trust in political systems ends in despair and failure. Trust only in God. For all our sins, we have added this wrong of asking for a king, said the people. Pray to Samuel, pray for your servants. But Samuel then says to them, don't be afraid. Even though you've done all these wicked things, do not withdraw your allegiance from the Lord. Instead, serve the Lord with all your heart. Do not transfer your allegiance to idols, but serve the Lord. But of course, as we'll see throughout the books of the Kings, this is the one thing that people are unable to do. They're unable to serve the Lord with all their heart. They're constantly running after idols. And the people who lead them after idols quite often are the kings. In fact, of all the kings that we're going to read about in the books of the Kings, the 1st and 2nd Samuel and the books of the Kings, only, I think, 3 kings are given the stamp of approval: King David, Zedekiah, and Josiah. Those are the only 3 who are really good people. Josiah is wonderful. David is pretty awful, but he's still given the seal of approval for some rather strange reason. So, fear none but the Lord, and serve him faithfully with all your heart. That's the closing verse of chapter 12. Bearing in mind the wonder which he has just performed. But if you persist in wickedness, you and your king will perish. It's quite a warning, isn't it? We too, nowadays, we don't serve the Lord with our whole heart. We're constantly running after strange gods. As we'll see, this goes back to the dawn of humanity. So maybe we shouldn't feel so bad about ourselves. The other thing is, we should not put not your trust in princes. We often think that the king that we've chosen for ourselves, or maybe it's the president we've elected, is some sort of Messiah. Now, Saul is anointed. An anointed one means a Messiah or a Christ. He's been anointed by God. He's been chosen by God. But he's only a human being. There's a double nature to the king. God's anointed, yet just another human being. The only king we should have is Christ the Lord. All the best. Hope that helps. And we'll be back to talk about the more exciting things that lie ahead in the first book of Samuel shortly. All the best. Bye.